Members of council, the meeting's about to begin.
Okay. Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council for Monday, April 20th, 2015 to order. We would normally start with an invocation, as is part of our procedure bylaw. But I understand that there's been a recent Supreme Court of Canada ruling regarding invocations and prayers before council meetings. And out of an abundance of caution, we will be suspending the invocation until we fully understand the impacts of the Supreme Court of Canada decision. There is some direction that's being suggested that we take later on in the agenda in this regard on our part of our agenda, the consent portion of our agenda, so we can give direction to staff to investigate that. But until that time, and we get that information back, we're going to suspend that portion of our agenda. So we will start with the singing of the national anthem, and I would ask all to rise. And I would ask if Councillor Papp would lead us in that. Thank you.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot of, in all thy sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Councillor Papp. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved that the agenda for the April 20th, 2015 regular meeting of council be adopted. Understand there's some additional items, and that's, I'm sorry, that's Councillor Ribbiak.
Yes,
Councillor Ribbiak has moved some additional items, the first being the report of Regional Councillor Beatty, which came today, and then the second, 1323, regarding the Pelham Supper Market 2015, adding those items. And I need a seconder for that. Councillor Durley, will you second those as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to call the question on the amendments. All those in favor? Any opposed? The amendments are carried. And then on the main motion as amended, are there any other changes to the agenda or additions? There being none, I'm going to call the question on the amended agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried as amended. Thank you. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That is any conflicts of interest that any members of council may have. Do any members have any conflicts that they need to disclose at this time?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Can that be so noted? Thank you. We will move to Councillor Beatty's report under report of regional councillor. Thank you for joining us, councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to you, council, and to the clerk, apologies for the lateness. Missing the blue book was the signal, the trigger to start sitting down and writing the report. In its absence, I was very busy last week, 2 days with the Niagara Prosperity Initiatives and 2 days with the Carbon Commission, as you probably are aware of the coordinated review meeting. And it wasn't until I put it on Outlook this morning and said, oh. So thank you for allowing this.
Thank you.
Just going to make comments on 2 or 3 items, and Mr. Mayor, I'm going to turn to you actually to give some background because it was uncertain in the way I read the minutes about the Joint Board of Management on Niagara Courts to delay the Provincial Offences Court House project. I gather some things have happened that have lessened the numbers of people being served. Is that correct? And is there the possibility we may end up with one courthouse?
I think, Councillor, I'm trying to find your report here. The result is that the costs or the expected costs for building of the 2 court facilities are substantially higher than initially anticipated. I think we were anticipating something around $15 million, and I think it's closer to $22 million. So what was suggested was by committee was that we have another look at that and to see if that's the best approach, if those things are needed, et cetera. So it's really going back to basics. The numbers have also flatlined and may not have been increasing, as you indicated, as much as one initially thought. But they haven't decreased, they've sort of flatlined in terms of tickets
And
for
there are some
provincial
alternate
offenses.
means as well that municipalities are taking on direct fines for traffic-related activities in some cases.
Yes, I raised that issue because, as council knows, we have, I think it's called AMP, is that correct? What's AMP stand for? It's a special program that we have.
It's the administrative monetary penalties.
So there's a portion that the judiciary has said, or the justice of the peace has said that they won't do anymore. I think it's part 2, provincial offenses, is that correct? Part 2s. They're not a substantial number, but I did ask them in any future reports that it's clarified going forward in terms of the impact.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
There are 2 programs here that are basically grant programs, and they're quite innovative. So I want to take a couple of seconds. First of all, to talk about the first one, Niagara Investment in Culture, 2015 funded project. This is a new grant program. We've solicited throughout the arts and culture community for submissions, whereas we are with all programs, overwhelmed with the number of those. A selection committee with criteria was established to narrow it down. What I found interesting is we tend sometimes to think of taxes only as being something that's negative, something that you're having to pay for. In fact, there's an investment, return on investment of about $8 for every dollar invested by the region. And this program has really caught on well. Judy Captain, 2 years ago in council, started looking at culture as an economic driver. We've done a full categorization of all of the cultural and arts amenities in Niagara. 2012, we were the Culture Capital of Canada, and the significant investment there has caused a real interest in the arts, and in particular arts in terms of being an economic driver for Niagara. So we're quite encouraged with the presentation, the first one on that particular funding. The next one I'm going to mention is the Niagara Prosperity Initiative. This is now in several years in manufacture, but it's a case where 3 councillors, and by the way, if you're Sesval, Patty, and Bart, that got changed, but maybe didn't get to your copy. It was myself, Beatty. Basically, we have about 10 people from various walks of life who sit around and go through the various submissions for the Niagara Prosperity Initiatives, looking at ways to help people out of poverty. And there's a very detailed sort of a marking scheme as to how they're to be evaluated. And the group, basically, there are 3 people that independently make this assessment. They report separately, but then come to some collaborative agreement with the rest of the group. And there's about $1.5 million annually goes toward that, some very significant projects. And I noticed that Pelham Cares, as far as I know, has not had a project there. And I've talked with the staff and the president of Pelham Cares to sit down with them to go through the various projects, some of which I think are very well suited for their operation here in Pelham in the future. And also wanted to mention that there is a Goodwill site at the Humberston landfill. We're looking for another nonprofit organization to have a similar reusable material drop-off at Niagara Region Road 12 in Grimsby. That's my report, Mr. Mayor. Any further questions you might have, be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beatty. Any questions from members of council for Councillor Beatty on his report? Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Councillor, I note on your report that there was a memorandum respecting building a disaster resilient Niagara symposium. What exactly was entailed in that memorandum? Were they?
Came from Kevin Smith, EMS, Emergency Medical Services. And if it happens like it's happened in the past, it involves cross-border and all first responders in terms of looking what would happen in case it's a major catastrophe. When I attended the event a few years ago, it was held in the Skyline. It was actually a cross-border event, so it involved people from Western New York, involved the state, federal on that side, as well as the customs and so on this side. So it's basically looking at scenarios. The one that happened here last year with the Army was a potential takeover of the canal by foreign forces, et cetera. And you know that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of troops and equipment and so on in the area. So it's that kind of scenario sketching in terms of looking at what the possibilities are and can we, in fact, be ready for such a disaster.
Thank you.
As a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, in that symposium, would they look at such things as an environmental catastrophe, you know, severe storms that the region has experienced in the last number
I
of
would
years?
have to think so, but I will get clarification from the Chief Cabinet in terms of the details of that. He didn't have that in his memo. Broader picture.
Thank you. That's something that we're looking at within our community, and it might be something that we could benefit from.
Okay, thank you.
Just going to ask the fire chief. Was he at that symposium? Were you at that particular symposium, chief?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it was attended by a number of us, actually our EOC working group or activity, and we've been going to it for 3 years now. And this year's, every year they bring in a speaker on a different topic. This year was the police department from Boston, and they talked about the Boston Marathon bombing and how they went about whatever. Last year it was the fire chief from Calgary that talked about the Calgary floods. So every year they have, how they dealt with it, how they planned, what they did, what went good, what went wrong, and just really kind of gives us an oversight on things they do address regional wide about the HIRA, the hazardous identification risk assessment, and it talks about wind and floods and stuff like that, ice storms. So.
Thank you, chief. Counselor?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Counselor Pat?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. An item under the reports with that, the letter, Councillor Beatty, about the transfer of highly enriched uranium, where did that, what letter?
Those were people I classify as being very well-known environmentalists, expressing
Okay, so it was that group.
significant concern for that even being a possibility through Niagara.
Yeah, this item, I hate to say it's below the radar screen, but it's highly, highly sensitive, and will be discussed again at the Transportation Steering Committee on Tuesday about the transfer of this particular highly dangerous, toxic through our community. So I'll wait and see. That's why I was curious to see who the letter's from. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you would, as you know, there's one issue about signage in town that hasn't been responded to yet by Public Works. If you'd follow that through tomorrow, I'll be at Prosperity Initiative. Could I mention to you, I've also had a call from a citizen concerned about the placement of the westbound dog leash park sign. Apparently people are turning in private driveway thinking that it's there and causing some concern, et cetera. If maybe it could be placed further down towards Minor Brothers, towards Center Street itself. The one that is the eastbound doesn't seem to cause any difficulty at all.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll raise those tomorrow at Public Works. The other issue for information of this council, Councillor Beatty and I received an email from a concerned individual who lives on Peachtree Park that their sign hasn't been put up. So we'll raise it tomorrow. I was unaware of that, so we'll put that up. Make sure that the region gets that sign up so that people can find them, etc.
And I sent both the original and today's email to Mr. Tripp.
Thank you, Councillor. Anything further for Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just at the bottom of April 9th, there you're saying received a staff report on the Go Rail initiative. Is there anything new that's on the horizon, or are we still listening to the same?
Meeting with the minister, the 20, how many?
On Monday,
Monday?
27th.
Okay. And that's a good second step. The first step was, of course, the initial meeting with the Premier herself. She asked for a substantial business plan. They have put that together. Looking very positive at this point in time. What the response will be is, we'll know much better after Monday's meeting.
Thank you.
Just to that quickly, the what's being recommended is a connector line, so it wouldn't be extending the Lakeshore West service from Go down into Niagara, but rather setting up really what I call a Hamilton hub. So it would be a connection from Niagara Falls over the canal, and they'd have to work out the timing with the Seaway Corporation, with a stop in St. Catharines, a stop in Grimsby, and then the final stop at the James Street location for Go. It's anticipated that that would be in the order of $100 to $150 million, as opposed to the 1.15 billion that was suggested in the environmental assessment a few years ago, because of the suggestion that a bridge be built or a tunnel be built, a bridge be built over the canal or a tunnel under the canal in the St. Catharines area. It was suggested that it was a 70-minute trip from Niagara Falls to Hamilton.
With the built-in 10-minute buffer time in case there's problems in the canal.
And then it was, the jury's out on how long it is from Hamilton to Toronto. I guess some said 50, some say 70. So they were trying to get it under a 2-hour trip from Niagara Falls. That's about all we know right now. They didn't disclose staging or anything like that. It is going to be at Public Works Committee tomorrow, so I will have some questions there. I understand that there's estimates in terms of the number of jobs that it would create, those kind of things, phasing in terms of the construction. You wouldn't just do it all at once. You might start in different stations, et cetera. So, and then we'll see what the response is at that meeting. Unfortunately, it's behind the provincial budget, which is on Thursday. So we'll see what the impact is. I hope that helps, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Councillor Beatty or myself? Thank you very much, Councillor Beatty, for your update, and we will see you in the committee meetings this week at the region.
Good. Public health was canceled.
Yes. All right, thank you, Councillor. It has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, be it resolved that the report submitted by Regional Councillor Beatty dated April 9th, 2015 be received for information. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks again, Councillor. The next item is adoption of council minutes. It's been moved by, thank you, moved by Councillor Junkin, second by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Minutes of our regular meeting of council of April 7th and of our special meeting of council of April 13th, 2015. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Next, we move to consent agenda items to be considered in block. Before I read the motion, are there any items that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? There being none, it's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, second by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved, the following consent agenda items be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. 1, recommendations of the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 7th, regular committee meeting of the whole. 2, recommendations of the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 13th, which was a planning meeting under the Planning Act. Minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole of April 7th and minutes of the planning meeting. Number 5 is staff reports of routine nature for information or action. This is regarding the 2015-16 Arts Vest Grant application, and the motion is, be it resolved, the council receive the issue sheet regarding the Arts Vest application, and that staff be authorized and directed to proceed with an Arts Vest application as outlined in the issue sheet. Then we move to action correspondence of a routine nature. The only item is from the 613 Lincoln and Welland Regiment Army Cadets, and the motion is, be it resolved that the action communication received from the 613 Royal Canadian Army Cadets be received, and the request that the town donate the use of the Pelham Marina facilities for the Cadet Corps annual review ceremony on Saturday, June 6, 2015, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. be approved in principle, subject to existing bookings for the facility, and conditional that written documentation be provided to the town that all necessary insurance and applicable permits have been obtained, and that town staff be directed to coordinate the use of the facility within existing user groups. And then we have information correspondence items. The first is regarding the Lincoln M. Alexander Award 2015. The next regarding Bill 36, which is a private member's bill regarding Respecting Private Property Act. The next is a letter from Jay McGregor, zoning bylaw amendments, 1022 Pelham Street. The next is a letter from S. Duncan regarding the farmers market. The final is the Supreme Court of Canada ruling, and the recommendation is that we receive it and refer it to staff for a report. Then we have information from the region of Niagara, and it's the regional report CSD 23, tax policy, tax ratios and rates. Be it resolved that we receive the report for information. And finally, minutes of the Architectural Design Advisory Committee of February 12th, 2015. Thank you for your patience. Discussion on any of those items? Councillor Papp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director of Planning. Immediately following our public planning meeting with respect to the property on South Pelham in Welland Road, maybe you can just clarify for me. The next day I saw that they were out there boring holes. And I also noticed that the Dyer Asset Management is advertising leasing space. So maybe you can help me so I can help my constituents understand what exactly is taking place, so that, normally I don't ask this, but I had a lot of questions asked. Just coincidentally, the next day, they're there boring holes. So maybe you can help.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's not unusual. Those bores would be done for the development of studies or development of architectural designs. The leasing information, I spoke with the owner about that, and he's working in advance of any approvals, anticipating an approval to hopefully line up some leases so that he can build quickly and all at one time with leases in hand, as opposed to have to stage the entire development.
Counselor?
Well, I'm satisfied, but again, I guess it begs the question that we haven't made a final decision on it yet. And that's my only concern, as not on my concern too, but also some of the constituents who are, that there isn't some presupposition of there. And I'm not suggesting that, I understand that they have to fill the places with some basic understanding that they may get the project. If they don't, then they're back to square one.
Mr.
Right.
Glover?
Mayor, this type of work or studies or
Right.
boring, say, could also be done in order to market the property if it was
Right.
to be sold. So it's not unusual to be boring. The optics of it perhaps isn't the best, but I don't believe there's any ill will or
Okay.
malice intent.
Well, I'm glad you responded to that, so that the general public, those that are it's being watched, there's not a secret, quite intensely, and we want to make sure that that's, and I'm glad you answered that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Durley, is it on that issue?
Actually, it's on this property, but
Okay.
not that particular issue. I have received since that meeting several emails of concern, people that missed a meeting, either were away, out of town, so on and so forth. I have forwarded them through our CAO to staff and to Nancy, so I'm just hoping that that could get there for consideration as well. I'm not sure if there's a deadline. If there is, then, it'd be nice to know what the deadline is, but I have forwarded them because they're running so close to the actual planning meeting, so.
Thank you. Mr. Glover?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, each and every response or correspondence that we receive on this topic will be incorporated into a recommendation report, either physically or through mention. Any comments or letters that have been submitted for that purpose will be included. Any emails or issues that have been brought up to staff will be addressed. So that will be fully addressed in the recommendation report, so council has a full picture on prior to decision. In terms of a deadline, the real deadline is up to the point where we draft the recommendation report. We would accept comments up to that point. If it comes in after, unfortunately, we can't include it into our report, but obviously it would be available for council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I presume that this item of correspondence that's on the agenda will also be included, Mr. Glover, will also be included in your consideration. It's really backup information for a presentation that was given. Is that correct?
Sorry, could you direct me to the information you're speaking of?
1153. Mr. McGregor?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on that particular item? The minutes of that? Okay, thank you. Anything else on any of the other items in consent? Councillor Papp?
Well, very quickly through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll just leave it up to staff. I see every year, the Lincoln Alexander Award, there's a letter that comes in. Just out of curiosity, what is the protocol? What do we do? Do we talk to the schools, or how is this marketed? How is this promoted? Can someone help me with this?
Ms. Van Ravensway?
We will be contacting the schools as well to make sure, to see if they have anything that will fit.
So we actually take the lead,
Yeah.
and then whatever application the municipality submits them.
Right.
Okay, that's all. That's all I need to know.
Okay, thank you very much. Others? Ms. Van Ravensway, can you fill us in a little bit more on this Arts Fest grant application? There's no sort of detail on what we're applying for in the report, or I couldn't see it. Can you just fill us in with a little more detail?
Yeah, this is it's new to us, grant opportunity. Arts Fest is a nonprofit organization that gets funding from, I know the Trillium Foundation, as well as, I believe, a couple of other foundations. And what they do is we would apply, and the criteria is you have to have a cultural master plan to apply, and especially a new one. It's to give the plan a boost, as well as what they do is they come in, they work with the arts groups, nonprofit arts groups, and they will present seminars on how to work with the business community. And then the arts groups try to start to work with the business community. Every dollar that they receive from the business community, this grant will match. So we are basically facilitating the application and marrying the two together.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Seems to be a great opportunity for us.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that and look forward to hearing more about it as a potential. Thank you. Any other comments, questions on the consent agenda items? Councillor Papp?
I'm on a roll here, so might as well go 3 for 3. Just through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Treasurer, I read the report on the tax policy ratios, and I was fascinated by the averaging of residential rates that we were above, people were looking at. And I just wondered, as you as a group of treasurers, and I realize you're trying to, equalize it as much as possible, because if we're going to attract any kind of industrial commercial assessment rate and investment, people are, I just talked to some people today from another part across the border who are looking here and said, what are your tax rates? What do you charge? So is there anything concerning that you as a group, or, right away caught me was the residential average, we were above the norm? Is that true? So somebody coming here would say, well, housing's affordable, but I realize that's amongst the 12 municipalities, right?
That's correct.
Is there anything there that we should be keeping an eye on? Or
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The assessment is really what drives the tax rate
Right.
with respect to from municipality to municipality. So it's difficult to compare. Our assessment values are higher because our values of homes are higher here. The basic consensus with the area treasurers with respect to change in the ratios and adjusting to the industrial was an absolute dead against it from
what
the
I
treasurer's
figured.
perspective. Basically leaving the ratios intact to collect taxes the way they are. The way that we benefit, obviously, is when we have commercial development. The commercial development helps
Right.
to reduce the amount that
Right.
the burden is on the residential. So we saw some of that this year. It was a minor decrease, but it did, with the addition of some non-vacant commercial properties in town this year, we had a shift to the residential, and it kind of just reduced it a little bit. But with the pending development, that'll make a huge impact on the residential rate as well.
And I'm glad, I just want to make sure we continue monitoring, because as we think of other communities surrounding us where they're struggling. Tax rates are very high. People, even though assessments are, I can think of a number that don't quite know what to do, because if they keep increasing particularly the residential side, I don't know if they can afford their homes. So whereas we're much more fortunate, and that's what I was watching, that as this commercial development, which is going to be so important to us, like you say, it could be even more significant as time goes along, so that it eases the burden that's on the local residential, and still encourages people to develop residentially here too, intensify. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Papp. Just want to draw your attention to the report, or the letter, actually. There's
Yeah, I saw
number
that.
7 here. That was approved, and that was an amendment to what was staff were recommending.
saw
And
that.
it says that staff be directed to calculate for information and demonstrate the results of a calculation where the rate will be reduced slightly to include industrial and/or commercial, and the residential rate increased by 1/2 of the proposed reduction. So regional council is looking for more information
Right, I saw
on
that.
this as it moves forward. I did try to do something sort of for 2015. Council didn't agree with me, but council did say it's something that we want to look at for
Good.
16 and beyond.
Good.
And it will be an opportunity for the treasurers to take a look at it. And the interesting comment, and maybe it's because of a new council, but some regional councils were asking, especially some of the new mayors were saying, I don't remember this ever coming to the local council for our, it's always after the fact. What does the local council think about the rate, et cetera? So maybe that's something that kind of can occur. It hasn't occurred
I've
in the
never seen
past.
it, no.
So maybe that's something that we could move into that as well, and have a
Good.
really good discussion on how it impacts across the entire region, and impacts municipal property taxpayers within each of the communities.
I couldn't agree more, Mr. Mayor, and particularly as you're aggressively marketing the economic development components of the different parts of the area. What are the strengths and areas, and why do people want to live here? Why do they want to start a business? And these are the components that they look at right off the bat, and as long as those types of attributes are included, that'll help drive that kind of, stimulate that kind of development.
The other one that I've been looking at is the multi-res, which is significantly above comparative groups. And so at one time, we say, well, we want more affordable housing across the region, and yet at the other, we have a very high rate, or ratio, I guess, of multi-res. So it's something that we should definitely look at.
Thank you.
So thank you for raising it.
Okay.
Anyone else on that particular issue? Any other issues on the consent agenda? There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you. Next, we move to my report. Thank you. And also the opportunity for councillors to report. We just have my report this evening, and so it's before you. A couple of highlighted items. The first is, and I see a number of them here in the audience this evening, Councillor Durley and I and Director Van Ravensway had the pleasure to participate and be at the Fawn Hill Bandshell as they launched their 2015 concert series. My report says congratulations and thanks to the committed volunteers and sponsors for ensuring that a wonderful 10th anniversary series this year. And certainly we encourage people to check out their website, fawnhillbandshell.com. It's a great lineup, and we look forward to the 10th anniversary coming forward. Along with Councillor Papp, I also participated on the 10th of April at the United Way of South Niagara, their campaign close, and it was wonderful because they completed their campaign, the $650,000 goal. Congratulations and thanks to all of the donors, and I know that members of staff and council here at the town also give, and members of the community give. So very, very important cause, and congratulations and thanks to their donors. Along with Councillor Durley, Junkin, Papp, and Ribiak, I was thrilled to attend the annual Short Hills Firefighters Association installation dinner. Thrilled because it was at the new Station 3. What a wonderful facility, and it was a great group. I think they said they had 64 or something people there, which was fabulous for that fire hall. Congratulations to the award recipients, and thank you to those that received the Length of Service Award recognition. I understand from the chief that at least one, maybe others, will be coming here to council for special recognition for 20 years of service. So we look forward to thanking them personally here at the council chamber. But again, congratulations to Short Hills Association and at the new Station 3. On the 14th of April, I participated in something that was hosted by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and it was called Community Economic Development 101. I have asked the clerk to put something on your desks about that. It was really a great session that talked about the background of economic development and the key economic development concepts. As we've discussed with our stakeholders in the Economic Development Task Force, buying local or CIP or infrastructure or different facets and different ways of encouraging economic development. What the Ministry has actually done, if you take a look with this reference guide, they've developed a matrix, and it's essentially 60 economic development items that a municipality can do and a community can do. Workforce and labor force development strategy, youth engagement and retention, creative economy, downtown revitalization, environmental greening. So many of the initiatives that we do and are trying to do, not only in the economic development focus in those sessions that we've had, but also around this table, and the community events is in here as well, like the Bandshell and like Summerfest. All of that is in here. They've developed, I didn't give this to you because I wrote all over it, but they've developed this sort of activity matrix which will help and outline each of them. And what I'm suggesting, Council, is that I think it would be an excellent session for all of council and for members of that Economic Development Working Group to hear the presentation. I've asked them, can they condense it, because it was a morning, so can we keep it short? And then it'll allow us to focus on the things that we're doing and the priority things that we want to do. So a lot of it has been, we've talked about, but this will allow us to formalize it and put it into order, into a type of matrix or challenge map, and then we can circle the priorities. So that's what I'm suggesting that we do. They have a presentation that they can give to us, and then we sort of go into working groups and work our way through this. So we pick business development, one group would do that, the next group would do community revitalization, what do we do, et cetera. And it'll really help us formulate the plan, I think. So I think it fits because we want to make sure we don't miss anything, but I think we'll also be pleasantly surprised that we're doing a lot of things that we might just think is community building, but they think is economic development. So if it's okay with council, I'd like to schedule that meeting with representatives of the ministry on that, okay? Thank you. And if you have any questions, I know it was just put on your desk tonight, but if you have any questions, please let me know.
Mr. Mayor, are you trying to get this done in the next 30, 60 days?
I
or-
think so, yeah. If we can do it, I spoke to the presenter. I said, would you present to a council? Would you present to 15 people? And they were absolutely thrilled to do that. So if we can do it in May, sometime schedule it in. And we don't want to lose track of where we are. I don't think it'll take us off that track, but I think rather it'll help us organize it a little bit better. I know when we were discussing it, we were saying, what about this, what about this, what about this? They've done all the thinking for us in terms of how it's organized, and I think this will help us. So that's what I'm suggesting. Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It might be appropriate to invite the members of the Economic Development Strategy Committee as well.
That's what I'm
and have them-
suggesting. All
Okay,
the
perfect.
members of those group, and that would be the next Economic Development Strategy meeting.
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Any other questions on that?
No, let's do it.
Okay, thank you. And then the final is, and Councillor Beatty talked about it, and Councillor Junkin was there at this event, and this is the review of the Greenbelt and Niagara Escarpment Commission, the provincial policy statement. I wrote this report before that, attending that, Councillor Junkin, so that's why your name isn't here, but you were there and present, and a spokesperson for your group as well. Packed room of about 350, 360 people participating in one of 14 reviews across the province of those 4 planning acts. I believe the director of planning has given us some information on that and provided some information to the region, et cetera. But it was a very, very good session, and really talking about the Greenbelt. So I reiterated to our group what our issues are regarding the Greenbelt and the hamlet designation for Ridgeville, how municipal facilities like fire halls aren't allowed in the Greenbelt. Also some challenges or some issues with boundaries, and that was a big issue across the entire room, that maybe some sort of mechanism needs to be in place to look at boundaries for the Greenbelt. The big push does seem to be actually making the Greenbelt bigger or extending the boundaries of the Greenbelt, so we'll see how that shakes down. One of the other issues that came up is really the Fawn Hill Kame and the area of natural and scientific interest. As you know, we're committed, this council's been committed to encouraging that and maintaining that area of natural and scientific interest. The Fawn Hill Kame is actually mentioned in the Greenbelt plan, and maybe it's something that well, I did raise it and put it on my sheet on behalf of council, but I wanted to let you know that that's something that we think maybe the ministry should look at. There's specific rules relating to the Fawn Hill Kame and aggregate resource extraction, and maybe we should send something to the various ministries that are reviewing this to say, please ensure that the Kame is maintained and enhanced. So I wanted to see what council thought about if it's okay if I were to send a letter to the government regarding this. that we would ask them to ensure that whatever policies they have in the new Greenbelt 2.0 or whatever it's called, that somehow that there's a proper mix between the area of natural and scientific interest and whatever they're trying to do with aggregate. So I would send a letter to say, please preserve, which is a position of this council, please maintain and enhance the cane, and if you can do it in the Greenbelt, probably better than, stronger than having it as those policies of the area of natural and scientific interest. Thoughts from council? It's consistent with what our policy is. Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do think it's consistent with our stand. The exemptions that are within even the ANSI designation are big enough that you could drive a huge stone truck through, and I fear that they may be. So anything that we can do to draw that, the attention to that issue to the minister, I think would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Others agree? You agree to that? Okay, so I'll do that this week, send some information off to the ministry on that. Interestingly, the individual at our table who was assisting and facilitating discussions from Peterborough, but she was fully aware that the Greenbelt Act had that in it, so it's definitely something that we don't want to lose track of. So I'll do that on behalf of council to maintain our consistent approach. That is my report. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Thank you very much. I appreciate your latitude on some of those issues, but I think they're important to the community. So it has been moved by Councillor King, second by Councillor Daly. Be it resolved, the council receive Mayor Augustine's report of April 20 for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now we move to consideration of reports. The first report has been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor Ribbiak. Be it resolved, the council received the issue sheet Pelham Farmers Market wine sales pursuant to new provincial regulations, and the council support the Pelham Farmers Market Committee in allowing Niagara Wines to participate in the weekly farmers market, and that the participating wineries supply proof of $5 million liability insurance, naming the town of Pelham as co-insured, and further, the council support the licensing of the entire Peace Park area to accommodate monitoring of bottles of wine purchased at the farmers market. Discussion. Councillor Papp?
Just a couple of quick questions through you to Vicky. The $5 million liability insurance, is that standard or is that higher than normal?
Ms. Van Ravensway?
Yes, that is standard. I did speak to Mr. McAvoy, and when it comes to alcohol, it is a $5 million liability.
But at the same token, look at Madam, we would also be on the hook for $5 million as well, I presume.
Councillor, you're suggesting for the
I'm just saying that if I'm the winery, I have to provide $5 million worth of insurance. So we're protected. I think our liability limit is 20 million. Is that 25? So that's included. Okay. So the aggregate is there. That's all I want to make sure.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead.
Yep. You want to keep going? Or
That's all right, like Councilor Durley. It's just
Okay.
a very clarification question.
Thank you. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Another clarification question. We do have a special occasion permit which deals with the alcohol being served at the supper market. The winery, if in fact they do sell at the farmer's market, is responsible for their own, it's their license that is in jeopardy. If anything goes wrong with that, is there a conflict between the two? And I'm wondering, is it necessary that we license the entire Peace Park in light of the fact that we are not responsible basically for the sale of bottles of wine from the farmer's market? Just a clarification, I can't get my head around this whole thing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So your first question was, are we, whose license is liable if they're selling and we're selling? What the farmer's market vendor will be doing, the winery will be doing, is offering samples from their booth, in front of their booth. They're not allowed to walk through the market. So they're controlling consumption in front of their booth. Secondly, they are allowed to sell bottles of wine. Their permit, once they receive approval or not from us, they will apply to extend their permit from their facility to our farmer's market. It has nothing to do with our special occasion permit in the Peace Park, okay? In speaking to the supervisor of the inspectors of the AGCO, I was a little concerned, being that we have sales of the wine bottles here, which we would like to encourage. Although we have a public event right beside, which is licensed. Number one, how do I control the bottles coming in, and is it allowed? And right away under section, it's in the report 26, we can allow sealed, unopened liquor purchased from another agency onto the premises if the liquor is intended to be for personal use elsewhere than on the adjacent premises. So we have a couple of options. We could say, no, you can't bring your bottles in, which that is what we normally do during Summerfest or an event like that, because it's very difficult to control. But being that we are in a smaller premises, and we feel that if we were able to license the whole park, we would have better control because we would have monitors throughout the whole park. Now, in the past, we have had a couple of incidents of approaching people that did not purchase from the winery at the supper market. And it was a difficult situation where when it's not fully licensed, it's difficult for someone to understand that you need to control what is going on in our public park. According to the AGCO, no, we don't need to license the whole park. It would be up to us, although it may be easier to monitor if you're licensing the whole park, and we are recommending, as they have recommended, a low, what they call a low risk fencing that would be permanent. So it would be 36 inches, perhaps a chain link or a chain, whereas you can open it for better accessibility throughout other times of the year. So the answer is, do we have to license it? No, we don't have to license it. It would be easier to control if we did.
Counselor?
Yeah, just to follow up, if someone purchases a bottle from Winery A at the farmer's market, walks to row 10 of the band shell, uncorks it and starts to drink that, is it the fact that it's not a licensed area at present? The licensed area is the supper market. So in fact, is the license at the supper market in jeopardy with this happening?
Correct.
It is.
Yes. Because we're allowing, because the other issue is, through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, we own the park. We own the band shell area, we own the supper market area, we also own the farmer's market area, which also makes us unique. We are ultimately responsible for all three areas and what happens.
Okay, thank you. The other issue is, with the 3-foot fence, could this pose as a safety matter where people can inadvertently trip and fall over them or this type of thing? You know, I'm just looking at that as a safety thing, especially if they happen to uncork that bottle of wine that they shouldn't have.
I would hope that it wouldn't be. I mean, it's a 3-inch area, you know, I mean a 36-inch fence, whereas you would be able to see it. It shouldn't be an issue.
Our Director of Planning and Development is probably wanting to answer in relation to the building code, is that correct?
Actually, it's, crime prevention through environmental design. Typically, the 3-foot fence that's spoken of is used in SEPTED to control where people go and to create to include a space where people should go or should not go. In terms of the fencing, it's usually not a safety risk because of the visibility and the height of it. So I just wanted to add that to it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Hope that helps, Councillor.
Yes, it does. Now, again, if in fact there is this safety fence that's put around, it will be around the perimeter and will not be between the band shell and the supper market, or between the supper market and the farmer's market. It would, all that space would be wide open. The perimeter would be the only thing that would be fenced. Am I correct in my assumption?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. It's considered a non-intrusive fence. It is our hope that once someone is in the area, they won't even notice they're within a compound. And the way the land rolls, you could be in the middle of the fence and you don't, the middle of the park, and you don't see the edge because there's a hill. So it looks like it's an open area, although fence would be along the boundary.
Okay, and just a final question, access points, how many and where type of thing, because we have people coming from many directions to access the beautiful band shell that everybody's enjoying, and and we're looking at accessibility as well as ease of entry is my opinion. The easier it is, the better everybody can have it. And this is just a question that enters my mind.
Okay, actually the map is on a different report, but I actually have extras.
Sure, why don't you pass that out?
We're recommending 6 access points.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there would be a flow, and that's in the other report, a open flow from the farmer's market into the band shell. If you see the farmer's market where it is located, there's one new marking that says access, and access to and from the farmer's market, which it would be signed. Right now, the farmer's market felt that by fencing the whole area, such as what we do with summer market, they feel cut off. So when we met with the farmer's market, they were very happy. We worked on the layout, and this is what they came up with, and we've moved the location of the washroom so that that will be fully accessible. So that's one access. The secondary access is right outside here. The door, or the second access, which is also fully accessible. There would be no fencing along the parking lot. Out here, it'd look open, because there would be fencing along the outskirts, from the parking lot corner all the way through to the access of the, where you walk up across from the post office. There would be permanent fencing from just going back a bit from the town hall to the corner, that little area. And there would be
Where the picnic bench is, that area
yeah,
that's right there?
Right over there. But the parking lot would be open again. There'd be fencing along the side of the plaza area with the access up the walkway. And a access to Pelham Town Square as well. That access, we would determine whether people are using it. If they're coming in through there with the larger access being offered now by the farmer's market. So there's 6 access points. As well, with the design of the proposed fencing, we would be able to clip the chain link off so that the bandshell committee would have access to bringing in their equipment when they needed and so forth.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirsty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support the report and the recommendations. However, I do have a concern that I think wasn't addressed here, and that is specifically around what Councillor Durley was alluding to. If, in fact, a person or persons buy bottled wine at the farmer's market and they bring it into our licensed area, we now assume responsibility for that. Has thought been given to a system or systems that we might use to control that, such that I know, for example, if you go to a restaurant and you have wine left over and they have a recorking policy, they put it in a sealed bag that is sealed there, and you get it home and then you can open it up. That might make it more apparent to our monitors as well if we had some sort of system like that. And we could use that as a way of advertising for either the farmer's market or the bandshell or both. I'm just asking that question
Okay.
as a method of
Ms.
control.
Van Ravensway, plans for that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we are going to be looking at some way of introducing something. As soon if this did go through, we would, there's 3 wineries that the farmers market is proposing. We would be contacting them, and they may already have something set up, whereas they would have a package, whereas it would be sealed. As people come in, they would be reminded that they would not be allowed to open their wine as well. But it is, on the other hand, it is a great opportunity to package it, or have a bag, whereas we could seal it and we could have the upcoming bandshell concert information, and the farmers market and the supper market advertising, and also it would be recognizable.
Thank you. Councillor?
In that case, Mr. Mayor, would it be appropriate that I move an amendment to this recommendation to direct staff to bring forth to investigate means of sealing the bottles in an enclosed bag, and that a further report be brought forth outlining what steps have been taken to ensure that those bottles of wine cannot be consumed within our licensed area?
Okay, Councillor, what I'd suggest, they may come up with a different option other than a bag, maybe it's a whatever, so
Let's
what I
make it
would,
more general.
yeah, so
That's
what I would
fine.
ask is that you maybe would direct staff to come up with a way in which
Perfect.
to deal with that,
Yep.
and then come back to council with a report.
That's appropriate, Mr.
Presume
Mayor.
that it would be informational. For example, somebody suggested maybe that there be a spot for, if you buy produce at the farmer's market, including wine, that you could, for lack of a better word, coat check it or check your produce, and that might be another option as well. So there may be other options. So I guess it's direction to
That's fine.
investigate that and get back to us?
Yep.
Okay. Do you want that as amendment, or can we take that as staff direction?
We could take it as a staff direction without an amendment to the motion as brought forward.
Okay. Ms. Van Mr. CA, we're okay with that direction? Okay, thank you. So it's considered staff direction.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Others to the motion for the first time, Councilor Ribbiak?
Thank you,
And I
Mr.
see
Mayor.
Councilor-
I'm also supportive of the report and the outcome. I think, as a matter of practicality, segmenting the park on Thursday evenings doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and as has been pointed out, creates some problems. I think culturally, we are as mature and sophisticated as a culture as any other, and can handle the presence of alcohol in an area like the park. But I do know, Mr. Mayor, that there are people with concerns, and I'm just wondering whether it wouldn't be wise to include within the recommendation that we provide some sort of review schedule, perhaps a sunset to this, so that we're forced to review it, so that we understand what's happening and can make a final decision on the continuation of this sometime in the future when it's appropriate to do that.
Okay, thank you. I think we sort of have three reports before us in there, but it is all of one topic. One of the reports does talk about a review process. I'm not sure it's this one or the other one. Ms. Van Ravensway, can you speak about that? And the councillor is interested in putting in some sort of, I guess, formal process to come back to council with that.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's not in this report. Unfortunately, there's three different reports, all in the same area. So it's in the Banshall Committee concert report as well as in the supper market report. We're suggesting through promotions that we establish a small subcommittee, and that would be one volunteer from the Banshall Committee, one volunteer from the supper market, one volunteer from the farmers market to we could call it the promotional committee, but that committee would set up maybe throughout the season 3 different times or 4 different times. When meeting with the Banshall or farmers market committee, they suggested a booth at the farmers market, whereas they can receive input on our Thursday night experience, as well as we would also have the opportunity in the Peace Park a couple of times throughout the year, so that we receive input, how people are liking it or not liking it, and where they're from and so forth. We would also that committee would also set up a newsletter and collect a database of names like Friends of the Thursday Night and send out a weekly newsletter on what's going on next week as a promotional meeting.
Yes, I think so. So the council was looking for some sort of really status report or an opportunity for council to hear how it's going. I think it's similar to what we did last year with the supper market and monitoring process. Councillor, I was conferring with the CAO. I'd suggest that it actually go, because it's in the next report, which is a little confusing. Perhaps you can work on the wording of an amendment in that case, because it's actually, you want something to come back here directly for really a decision point. So if you want to work on an amendment for that particular report, status update, a report, something like that, and an appropriate timeline, which might be July at some point. What would you suggest, Ms. Van Ravensway?
In the supper market report, you'll see in the recommendation, it says the final recommendation states, and that staff meet with the Farmers Market Committee in the Banshall Concert Series in the fall of 2015 to review the feedback received by the proposed promotional subcommittee and present recommendations to council for the 2016 operations.
So maybe it's there, and we can ask that it come forward in halfway through the summer. Councillor?
I was just going to mention, Mr. Mayor, that I think the supper market report is an addition, and to be honest, I haven't had the same opportunity to review it all. So if it's there, I apologize for bringing it up early.
No, that's okay. It's there. What the director was pointing out was that we would be receiving feedback in the fall at the end. What you're suggesting is halfway through. So I'd encourage you to look at that last recommendation as we work our way through this report and the next report, and perhaps come up with some wording, or maybe the CAO can as well, in terms of how you might bring something back midstream. Okay? Anything further at this point, Councillor?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I did see Councillor Papp had a question, but I'm going to jump ahead because I haven't. Some of the feedback I've heard in the community about this is really the idea that the Banshall is really provides a wonderful family atmosphere. Can you outline, Ms. Van Ravensway, what steps we're taking to try to mitigate any negativity? Use the word compound. It doesn't look like a compound or whatever. So any negative aspects of this so that we can do the best to maintain that family type atmosphere?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we as well would like it to remain a family atmosphere. In doing that, we're recommending the lower fencing instead of the traditional Summerfest fencing, which I believe is 4 feet, something like that. As well as the supper market experience is to have local wineries to display and provide, their product, as well as sell their winery tours and so forth. And the glasses are very small. We're also suggesting that the craft breweries, that the glasses would also be small. For Summerfest, we tend to have beer cans, and in this case, we're asking that all product would be poured, and therefore it's not only a different atmosphere, if you want to call it that, but it's also easier to notice anything that shouldn't be drank during the area.
Okay, thank you. So it's part of it is what you're suggesting, local wineries, craft beer, as opposed to, we're not gonna put
It's not a beer tent.
a beer tent or a tap or anything like that up there. So it's the intention to be that kind of higher end event as well?
Correct. It's a higher end event, if you want to call it that, as well as it's a very limited time period. It ends at 9 o'clock. It's it's a family atmosphere, and that's what we want to try to keep it as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Papp, thank you for your patience.
No problem. I guess, through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a more basic question. Maybe I'm missing it. The market starts first week in May. So are these wineries going to be selling the first week in May? Or am I missing, are they going to coincide with the band show concert series? Help me understand
Yeah,
this.
maybe the overall schedule of things as well would be
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, they need approximately 2 weeks to get their permits, 2 to
Right.
3 weeks to get their permits to extend their existing license. And they plan on starting the first week of the farmer's market and running through. At this point, they've had 3 applications, and they would rotate. There would be one winery.
So you
Go
see
ahead.
where I'm going with this. In fact, if I go there and buy a bottle of wine, and decide to sit before the concert series starts, consume it, have a picnic. So what you're suggesting, we would license it beginning now, whenever that farmer's market begins?
Ms. Van Ravensway?
Or are we talking when the
Through you, Mr.
concert
Mayor.
series starts?
The supper market license, we're proposing, it would begin June the 4th to September 3rd. It's 2 weeks prior to the concert series. The difference is, can they drink that bottle of wine in our park? The answer is no. According to our parks
Right.
bylaw, you cannot
Right.
assume alcohol in the park. Will it affect our special occasion permit? No, because we don't have one.
Right.
The liability would be the winery in the farmer's market, while they're in the farmer's market. Other than that,
So I don't, maybe we can get some more clarity on this. If someone decides, they start selling the first couple of weeks through you, Mr. I'm trying to
Go ahead.
go through the logistics. I don't want to spend, so I decide that I want to sit at a bench, even though I'm not allowed, but who's going to be there to see it? Who's going to be there to monitor it before we start these series? The liability, I would presume, would still be the municipalities, along with the winery selling me the bottle of wine. I'm not a lawyer, I'm just thinking that. But this licensing you're asking for is to start effectively, once the supper market starts, then it flows into the band show concert series, right? And then flows and ends when their particular protocol ends as well. Is that what we're looking for?
that's correct.
So I want to, I'm just thinking again, and I know you're gonna kill me when I say this, the demonization of all this, because you're right, it's public property. So regardless, I mean, the band shell's gonna be there, but prior to that, you're gonna be selling wine. They're gonna be selling wine, right? And people, whether they follow the law or they don't, human nature is that, if it's a nice night and you're there, you have a picnic, etc. If we license, and forgive me for using this analogy, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, but the entry points, once we license and fence it off, is this going to be like a Buffalo Bills game? You're going to check my bag and to make sure that it's clear? Or what if is that going to be, I'm not putting this, the security guards are going to physically ask me, oh, or did you buy wine? Are we going to physically
Is that
inspect?
Ravensway?
Are we going to physically inspect them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there will be signage at every entry.
Okay, that's what I'm getting-
No alcoholic beverages allowed within, or
Right.
to be brought in. And if the security guard feels, they do have a bottle with them, they will ask them, do
Okay.
you have alcohol, with you? And then we will implement whatever sources that we come up with, whether it's another bag or whatever, and we will make sure that they realize you cannot uncork that bottle.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. It's very clear in other venues that I've been, you cannot bring in alcohol of any nature. And if you do, don't get this, I'm sure you're escorted out. You cannot do that. So I don't want to be that draconian, but the fact is that once this is licensed and someone brings in, and if the guard through their discretion feels that some can question myself and say, well, what are you going to do with this wine? I guess we have every right to, because we're protecting our interests of our municipal property. Is that fair to say?
Ms. Van Ravensway?
Correct. If through you, Mr. Mayor, if in other instances that we have events that are not licensed,
Right.
i.e. Canada Day,
Yeah.
we do have instances in which we confiscate
That's what I wanted to know.
alcoholic beverages.
So pardon me, Mr. Mayor, I'm glad the confiscation attribute to that, and I know the fire chief is there, that people understand this,
Correct.
that they can't violate this even though, the people will test us. But the fact is that if we are expanding that whole licensed area, there's going to be strict monitoring. Aside from, like we say, affecting sales of the supermarket, and we don't want to disrupt the overall venue and content of what we're trying to do with the concert series, which is superb. Same thing with the farmer's market. So I think the review would be interested to see how this all pans out. Because I'm thinking, there have been, who's been selling, I think downtown St. Catharines, Mr. Mayor, and I think Niagara on the Lake have been doing this. I'd be curious to see how they've been.
At their what, at their farmer's market?
Yeah.
Well, the Fenwick Farmers Market did participate in this.
Is that right?
Last year.
Okay.
But it's obviously not associated with
In event.
Any event.
or events.
So I buy it and I leave.
Right. So that's what it'll be like for the first few weeks and presumably the last few weeks of the season.
Okay. Okay, fine. Thanks. I'm sorry to.
No, that's okay.
explore it. I was
It's
just
good.
curious about the options.
Councillor Durley, then a Kersey.
Yes,
And then we're gonna
thank you, Mr.
call
Mayor.
the
Just,
question.
in that discussion, something just clicked again now. Before the supper market and band shell starts,
Right.
the farmer's market will be selling
Wine.
bottles of wine. And it was mentioned that the liability is on the winery if in fact there is an abuse to alcohol policy. But as soon as we become licensed with the supper market, the liability shifts from that. I
Yeah,
sort
Ms.
of
Van
lost a
Ravensway?
little bit here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the liability only shifts, they're responsible within their area.
Right.
The liability shifts when they enter into our area.
Okay. Okay, regardless if we have a license or not.
Correct.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment was to perhaps suggest that our bylaw officer be directed to make a couple of tours through the area during those timelines when we don't have the licensed area in the park. So there's sort of the fringe areas on the early spring and on the later fall, just to enforce the bylaw that you're not to be drinking in a public park. that would allay your concern about that, and give us an opportunity to monitor it. I mean,
Okay. Mr. CEO?
That'd be no problem, Mr. Mayor. We can certainly accommodate that, that direction.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ribbiak is anxious to close the debate on this.
Thank you. I don't know whether it'll close it. My concern is with regard to the period of time when we have band shell concerts. It occurs to me that outside of those times, conditions are no different than they are every single day of the year when we have a beer store just off the park, and anybody at any time can avail themselves of the park if they so choose, and they will have liabilities to carry with them. So I don't see that as being any different than it normally is. So I think the concern is really around when we have the event and when we enclose the park.
Thank you.
both those.
Anyone else? Okay, so the motion is that we receive the issue sheet. The council supports the Farmer Market Committee allowing Niagara wineries to participate in the weekly farmers markets. That participating wineries supply proof of $5 million liability insurance, naming the town of Pelham as co-insured. And further, the council supports the licensing of the entire Peace Park area to accommodate monitoring of bottles of wine purchased at the farmers market. And there is that direction, I've written it here, that Councillor Kersey suggested for staff to investigate a report for options for securing wine purchases. Okay, and we'll expect something back on that, but it's not a formal part of the motion. So you're going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now we move to the second of three reports. It's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved, the council received the issue sheet regarding the band shell concert request for 2015. And the council accept the solutions provided therein by staff to address the request from the band shell concert series, and that the board be notified as such. Discussion to this? Ms. Van Ravensway, I know you had a meeting today, and some of the members of that group were here at the meeting. They're agreeable to the solutions that are offered. Can you just, I believe, can you elaborate?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we were able to meet actually this afternoon at 3:30. The Director of Corporate Services as well was in the meeting. And we outlined every request.
Okay.
And
All right, thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Kirsty, then Pap.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In general, I agree with everything that's here. I do have a couple of minor concerns. One, I have a concern with the street banner. Not necessarily that the street banner could be displayed at times when other groups are not using it, but I do have a concern of trying to double up on the banners. Traditionally, we have highlighted those events that were taking place in the following month. So if we have Canada Day, I think that should be the premier event. If we have the art festival, that should be the one that's highlighted. And to have a secondary banner there would be distracting from that and detracting from the promotion of those other events. At any other time, I don't have a problem with having the street banner up there, but I think we should give exclusivity to those events that we have in the past. The other area I have a bit of concern about, only because I saw what happened last year, and that was with using the council chamber for the dressing room. I just like an idea of how that's going to be monitored, so that, because last year we did have situations where people were roaming through the building, albeit they said they got lost, and there was alcohol consumed in the council chamber outside of our licensed area that jeopardized our license. So I just like to have some understanding of how that's going to be monitored and how we're going to control the flow of people through the office space as well.
I think that has been addressed. Ms. Van Ravensway?
Mayor, yes, we have asked that the band be accompanied by a volunteer from the band shell committee, and they have been very agreeable to that. We will also work on a solution to the elevator being accessible to an open office upstairs. And the Director of Public Works will be working on that so that the area will be secured, and it will be up, the responsibility will be up to the volunteer to keep them at bay.
Okay, thank you, Counselor.
No, that's fine, as long as they're willing to take the responsibility and to be forceful enough to enforce it. It can be intimidating when you have 5 members of a band or 6 members of a band in here, and if they're pulling booze out of their change duffel bags, for one person to confront them and say, put it away. So, having said that, if they're willing to take the responsibility and enforce that, that's fine, I guess.
Okay, thank you, and it
Lead
seems
my
like they are.
concern.
Thank you. Counselor Papp?
Sure, just a quick question. I see the Peace Park improvements, the issues of walkability. Is this walkability or accessibility or both?
Ms. Van Ravensway?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just
no,
trying to
that's
figure,
fine.
I'm trying to
I
figure
just-
out what,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the concern is serious safety issues and the walkability. So for instance, unlevel ground. So staff will be contacting the Band Shell Committee, and they'll be setting up a walkthrough
Yeah.
in the very near future to try to address any issues that they have.
that's great. I'm looking at more, even something more specific. Would there be, is there maybe not this, an option at some point where those that are confined to walking devices and those that an area would be built, allow them an ability to watch the series, watch the concerts, listen to the concerts with some sort of designated area? I don't know if that's in the works. I know we talked about that last year, and I agree with the contour and the topography, but also thinking about those that would have a much easier, I don't know.
And through
Maybe-
you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that what we can do through the walkthrough, areas could be identified, and when visitors are coming in to watch the series, there could be a volunteer controlling, you
Yeah.
know, accessible seating areas, perhaps.
Yeah, that's,
Thank you. I think this appears more, having spoken to some members of the Band Shell Committee, I believe this is more about somebody putting their chair down and
Okay.
toppling off to the side, because the ground isn't, although it's somewhat bold, it's not as even as perhaps it could be,
Okay.
with some quick and easy sloping. So,
but notwithstanding, I mean, we have a lot of people that are in the
Right.
senior, who need wheelchairs, walkers. I mean, I'm not belaboring, it's just that at some given point, you have to maybe put an area up. I've been to other venues where they're allowed to
okay,
sit, something you can explore.
okay.
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr. Mayor.
Ravensway, thank you. Others? There being none, are we ready for calling the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. And now, this was the additional item the council put on the agenda. It's it's moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Kersey. The council received the issue sheet regarding the Pelham Supper Market 2015. The council designate Pelham Supper Market as an event of municipal significance to be held on Thursday evenings from June 4th to September 3rd, 2015. And the proposed operating details be approved as presented in the report, including licensing the entire Peace Park for the upcoming season, and the staff meet with the Farmers Market Committee, the Band Shell Concert Series in the fall of 2015 to review the feedback received by the proposed promotional subcommittee and present recommendations to council for the 2016 operations. Ms. Van Ravensway, this was a late addition to the agenda. Can you just outline why it is a late addition? Is it because of that meeting that you had this afternoon? You wanted to get some feedback from the Band Shell Committee before you put this on the agenda or propose this?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, the report was actually ready and prepared, although we wanted to wait until after the meeting to make sure everything was okay to go through.
Okay.
And I think that we've basically, just a quick overview, the operating season is going to start June the 4th, which is 2 weeks prior to the actual Band Shell concerts. This is it helps not having so many people around when you first start. The first 2 weeks of the season, we will be offering just low-key entertainment within the area, so there's something going on. We would be applying for this special occasion permit for the whole park as per the attached plan. We would request that we have volunteers for the subcommittee so that we can start that right away. The organizing and especially the promotion of our Thursday night experience in Pelham. We are also going to be encouraging the chefs to have cooking demonstrations and offer product from the farmers market each week, as well as a added addition. And I believe that we have spoke about everything else on the other two reports, unless you have further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Should the last recommendation include the supper market committee? It doesn't, it just talks about the farmer's market and the band shell. Ms. Van Ravensway?
That is because we don't have a supper market committee, it is staff, it's a staff activity now.
You threw us off.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Ribbiak, you were contemplating proposing an amendment, I think, to this?
Yes. And if I may move that the final paragraph of the recommendation, the one that starts, and that staff meet with the farmers market, et cetera, that the words "in the fall of 2015" be stricken and replaced with the words "monthly throughout the 2015 season," and the final words of that paragraph for the 2016 operations be stricken as well. So it then reads essentially that they meet monthly throughout the 2015 season, bring recommendations to council as they develop, and probably implemented right away.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Papp?
I will, just to get, just I'm clear, I'll put it on the floor. Just
Okay. So what the councillor is suggesting is instead of in the fall of
Right.
2015, that
You
it
do it
would say
monthly.
monthly through the 2015 season, so that the meeting would occur monthly and review feedback received by the proposed promotional subcommittee and present recommendations to council, period. So the
So
councillor.
it doesn't take effect in 2016. It may take effect immediately. In fact, the recommendations are cogent and relevant.
Okay, so it's, pardon me, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
So in effect, Councilor Ribbiak, if they come back a week later after they meet and they say we got to make these changes, then they can be implemented immediately or simultaneously.
Exactly. If they are, if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
If they are recommendations that require council involvement, and they may not, they may be simply operational and they
Just
can,
logistics
they can do
things,
that
okay.
on their own. But if
Okay.
there's something that affects the bigger picture, the principles upon which this is settled, then council will need to look at them, and probably sooner rather than later if there is something urgent. For example, if the recommendation is this is out of hand and it ought to stop, that's something you
Licensing.
probably need to know
Oh,
right
yeah.
away.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
I
you.
got it.
To the amendment, any others? Okay, I got to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? All right, any opposed? The amendment carries. And now to the main motion as amended. No? Any further discussion? There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried as amended. Thank you very much. Now we'll move to presentation consideration of bylaws. Okay, thank you. Thank you, members of the Van Shell Committee, and we'll talk to you shortly. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak. Be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaw, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass, and that the mayor, clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1, being a bylaw to appoint Judy Shepherd as acting deputy clerk for the corporation of the Town of Pelham. And Ms. Shepherd is here this evening in the audience, and she's been with the town for the last 2 weeks. Learning and all that, so thank you very much. The second being a bylaw to appoint John Ross and Belinda Phillips as building inspectors, bylaw enforcement officers, and property standards officers for the corporation of the Town of Pelham, and to repeal a series of bylaws. Bylaw 1140, which was 1987, 1860, which was in 96, 3187, which was from 2011, 3276, which was in 2012, 3352, which was in 2013, and 3353 in 2013, appointing various individuals as bylaw inspectors, property standards officials, and/or municipal law enforcement officers. 3, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a development agreement with the owner of 1732 Cream Street to permit a temporary dwelling. And 4, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 3598, 2015, that authorized the execution of a site plan agreement for lands located at 2, 4, and 6 Braden Way. Discussion on any of those items? I want to say thank you very much to staff for working with the owner of the property at 1732 regarding that temporary dwelling that we dealt with at our previous meeting. Anything else? No. There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. Whereas the Town of Pelham has been awarded a provincial community transportation pilot grant for 2015 to 2017, and whereas the Niagara region has approved and implemented a 10-year transportation strategy which will interconnect all affected communities throughout Niagara's proposed routes, including Pelham. And whereas the East Fonthill Secondary Master Plan has been approved and will include a well-defined transportation route through the development, including a roadway corridor, which aligns with the region's transportation strategy. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Pelham request the region to expedite the extension of the Pelham connection of its plans into the East Fonthill secondary area by the third quarter of 2016, and that Pelham and regional staff work collaboratively on this facilitation over the next 12 months. Councillor Papp?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. As we move through our transportation pilot program, and as we move through all the manifestations of what we're going to be doing with the East Fonthill area, it just seems logical that we ask the region to extend that connection. And in fact, there's been some informal, Mr. Mayor, you and I and the CEO met with staff. There have been some indication that they actually want to do this. So why don't we just put them on record and say, the sooner the better. That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Kersey, any further?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wholeheartedly support this. Our grant is for 2 years. It seems very important that we dovetail into the Niagara transportation system sometime during that grant period to truly evaluate what we've accomplished in that interim learning period or that pilot project. So the only thing I would add to this is that we would direct staff to circulate this motion to regional staff once it's passed.
Thank you. I think that's understood. And that was part of the intention to signal to regional council this council's interest in doing this. Councillor Papp?
And thank you, Councillor Kersey. You just mentioned, Madam Clerk, would this automatically be sent to the other 11 municipalities?
Madam Clerk?
We can take that as staff direction, certainly.
I'm just thinking, we have a Transportation Steering Committee meeting coming up on Tuesday, and I'd like to be in a position to say that this is what we've passed, and all of you should be aware of where we're going with this.
Good. Okay. Yep,
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anything else? Thank you very much, councillors, and I
you.
appreciate your leadership on this issue and bringing it forward. And I'll inform also Councillor Beatty.
Yeah.
So that it would be something that both of us will be working diligently on as your representatives. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. unanimously, so thanks again. Thank you. Oh, right. The next item, oh, thank you. You did prepare a motion on this. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. Be it resolved that staff be directed to review and update the naming of corporate assets, street naming policy, and to present it to the June Policy and Priorities Committee meeting for consideration. This is under matters of committee of the whole for or policies and priorities committee. This was something, Councillor, and councillors, I did send you an email on this, so I appreciate your consideration. I had a member of the public, Mrs. Arbor, actually talk about or ask whether the roads, for instance, had been named in the new East Fawn Hill development area. I went back to the street policy and noted that the name Klager, which is her background, was on the list, but there's very little information, and I noted that the list hadn't been updated for some time, I think in the early 2000s. So in addition, you'll recall that council did talk about the possibility of maybe naming some streets after some significant veterans from World War I, World War II, important, and other conflicts, because of the proximity to the Legion and Veterans Way, et cetera. And that has been, I pass it along to the Legion verbally, but this would actually allow staff to sort of work with the Legion on it, get some information, so that when developers are looking at the East Fawn Hill area or any other area in town and considering the naming of streets, that they actually use a more, I'll say, up-to-date, complete list. So that's the intention behind this, and I appreciate the two councillors moving it. And I would expect, for instance, that maybe some interaction with the Historical Society representatives, et cetera, would be called for to make sure that we have the correct write-ups for individuals, et cetera. And there have been some names that have been added and included already. So I appreciate your consideration on this and look forward to staff updating it. Comments, questions from councillors? Councillor Papp?
It's ironic, and it's nice that you brought this up, because I'm going through a similar process in another municipality where an individual is being recognized and an organization for the work they did, and they've since passed, and they are renaming the particular street after them, which is very appropriate. But the protocol is there, it was a little iffy, so, and I remember over the years we had come up with names, so this is a very, I could say, timely, considering not only new development, but other areas that we are looking at where people, you know, we have named streets, I know we've done this, and now's the time to maybe revisit it. So this is very good.
Okay, thank you. Any others?
Pat, I'm not on the list? Oh, my God. Cap square.
All right, thank you, councillor. Any other councillors? So we look forward to, if approved, we look forward to this coming back to us. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. CAO, for taking that on. Thank you. Now, we do have some items for the closed session, and as we normally do, we recess that portion of the meeting and then reconvene immediately following committee. So it's been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Papp. Be it resolved, the council recess the in-camera portion of the meeting and reconvene immediately following the committee meeting scheduled for this evening. I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried, and this meeting is recessed. Let's take a brief 2-minute break. Thank you.